I apologize, we're a couple minutes late on getting started, but I would like to call the MARTA Audit Committee to, where are we this morning? The Audit Committee to order. So the first line of business is to approve the minutes from November 22nd, 2024. The minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is the internal audit Q2 fiscal year 25 activity, and we will turn it over to Mr. Emil for further comments. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Greenwood, members of the MARTA Board of Directors. My name is Emil Zanov, the head of the Internal Audit Department. Thank you for the opportunity to present the briefing for Q2 of MARTA's fiscal 25, the internal audit activities. If we can maybe pull up the slides, that will be great. Thank you. Well, the other slide deck. No, you have to go to the, like the one that looks like this. Yeah, pull up the other slide deck. Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll begin with the operational audit group and the activities there. We kicked off two audits during Q2 of fiscal 25. Again, the beginning is October 1st to December 31st. The Summerhill program, Summerhill BRT, and also another audit of rail station management. We'll report those outcomes in the May Audit Committee meeting. In addition, we finished several audits during the same period of time. The first one is the Clayton County Operations and Maintenance Facilities. We identified 4 significant findings, which I have bulleted on the slide, related to the FTA Quarterly Milestone Progress Report, project management oversight, and the use of several different project management scheduling and document control tools. We're working with the Capital Program Office to establish corrective action plans and due dates for those corrective action plans, and we'll have those reported during the May Audit Committee meeting. If we move to, I can actually control the slides myself. I'm getting up to speed.
We're high tech around here.
Yes, and we're cyber protected. The next audit is the bus operations, specifically the CDL, the Commercial Driver's License, and Medical Cart Management. We identified 3 significant findings, and I know that the operational group under Peter Bruno is actively working on the remediation. I have actually seen the draft corrective action plans and what's being done about it. And I'm pretty confident, even though one of the items is marked as past due, I'm pretty confident that very good progress is being made to get us to a better state. So hopefully in May, we'll have some of these items kind of along the way of either being updated with better due dates or actually being closed. The next audit is the employee timekeeping audit. There is one item that's still in progress related to the use of a system called TeleDriver, which is very outdated. A budget item has been requested for the replacement of TeleDriver, and we'll see how that plays out, but I've put a July due date because by that time we should know what the budget looks like and how this item is going to move. Finally, Indian Creek, there was a capital program audit again, 3 findings, significant findings identified. And again, we're working with Carrie and her team to come up with meaningful, logical remediation plans and associated dates, which is why there is a date TBD, because I didn't want to rush and put just a random date there. I want to make sure the dates we put to the audit committee are logical, rational, and kind of feasible towards execution. From prior operational audits that we have discussed in the past, mobility service, all items have been closed, and this audit will be dropped from the audit committee reporting. We have one moderate item in the wayside access. Hopefully we'll be able to get that done in the middle line there. And then finally, attracting and retaining employee, which was an HR audit. Those items have been complete, and then this line will be dropped in subsequent future audit committee slides. Review of Trustee-Oriented Development, the TOD program. There is one significant finding remaining there. It has to do with the procurement and acquisition of an asset management system. We have lots and lots of active TODs, lots and lots of active lease agreements with multiple tenants. They contain multiple provisions, and it's important for us to be able to manage that revenue and lease agreement provisions well, to have a system instead of spreadsheets, emails, and all this manual work to get it done in a 21st century way. So hopefully we'll have that. The last item I want to point out is the capital improvement program follow-up. We've been carrying this humongous number of significant findings for a while now, and I think it's important for the Department of Internal Audit, for MARTA itself, for the capital program, but also for good visibility to audit committee to redraw a new baseline. We're in the final stages of getting the services of professional construction auditing firm, which will bring along with my employees to kind of look at the central project management office and to set a new baseline of what are the policies and procedures that have been, adopted, written, and being followed, and what's left to be done. Because I think carrying 28 items, these big numbers just I don't think gives you the right level of information. I think we need to have a new baseline and see where things are today and track the remediation going forward. So we're almost there. Hopefully we'll sign the agreement in the next couple of weeks and we'll get going. Moving to the IT domain, during the quarter we kicked off an audit of our train control and SCADA networks, specifically as it relates to access management. These are critical assets as it relates to our train movements and the control of that train movement. And it's important for us to periodically examine the security around that. I know Lawrence and his team are doing that on a day-to-day basis, but it's very important to have an independent and objective review of the risks, if there are any, as it relates to that. So we're working on that. We finished 2 audits. One is around software maintenance, where we found 3 significant findings. And the next one is around Windows 10 Enterprise End of Life project, where we have 1 significant finding that's in progress. As we have done in the past, I'm very hesitant to go into the details of those findings because of the security sensitive nature of some of them. So I'll beg and ask for your forgiveness, but I'll keep it at a very high level just to not feed the bad guys, sensitive information. From prior audits, we have a number of them. We will close the 3rd line item, which is IT support of critical enterprise applications and systems, because all the elements there have been closed. We will also close the 2nd from the bottom line, which is called Identity and Access Management Audit, and this is specifically for the enterprise part of MARTA, not the train control part, the enterprise network. We'll close that one as well. You see a number of items in yellow marked as past due. Now, they're past due because they're not to the finish line. I'm confident, and I've had multiple discussions with Rhonda and Tyson, who unfortunately is out of the office this week and cannot be here. Things are being done there. Some of these items require procurement of some new technologies, and some of them just require new processes. A lot of work is being done, so I don't want the audit committee to think that nothing's being done, because that will not be fair to the people doing the work. But from an audit perspective, I need to see something cross the finish line so the race is over, so we can take it off of the slide. So it's possible that we will feel comfortable from an audit perspective and extend some of those timelines and extend some of the deadlines. But I do want to feel that when we extend a deadline from an audit perspective, I have a reasonable assurance that that glide path towards the landing is logical and reasonable, not just a random date that will just kick the can down the road and we'll get past due again. We don't want that. We want things to progress and get done. So again, the message is things are being done. They're just not over the finish line. Switching over to the contracts audit group, that's where we produce the most number of audit reports. We finished 23 audits during the quarter, 22 with low risk and one needs attention. We found a few dollars in our overhead rate reviews that didn't meet the Federal Acquisition Regulation guidelines. And then we found $415,000 of unsupported costs in various different cost price analysis. I think these were, 2 audits specifically. And we continue to do that. That's an ongoing pipeline. We continue to churn on those contract audits as they come in. We don't necessarily have an audit plan. Finally, fraud, waste, and abuse have been somewhat active. We had 5 investigations, of which we finished 3, and we're trying to finish the other 2 this month. The first one was related to sort of a contract compliance issue in a specific business unit at MARTA. We investigated that and we found no substance. The second one is related to timesheet reporting of some excessive time, including excessive overtime. We found substance, and we had a lengthy discussion with the C-suite members responsible for that business unit, and I think they'll take some actions there. The third one was an allegation of fraudulent documents and receipts of a on a P-card report. This one was also investigated and not substantiated. This was more of like a wrong interpretation of some guidelines and policies by the employee who made the report. And we have 2 allegations that are still in process, but we hope to be able to finish them. So, and a lot of these require a lot of data crunching, a lot of document reviews, so they take time. And we do those with the same personnel that we do the operational audits. So we have a lot of juggling that we need to do. Madam Chair, with this I conclude my report to you and the audit committee, and I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? Mr. Pond.
Neil, I've got maybe it's not for you, but maybe to the management team here. When I see potential time card reporting abuse, and that's inherent in any large organization, what is the follow-up? Because that's an integrity issue to me, and I think it's a cultural thing in an organization. So what is the follow-up? What is the action plan when people are inflating their hours, so to speak?
So I'll give you the audit perspective and maybe speak of prior histories in this kind of situations. This is a relatively fresh allegation. We would investigate if there is substance, which in this case there was. We would typically consult with the C-suite member and his directors underneath, as well as if there is if these are represented employees, which in this case they were, we would bring in, labor relations, because we want to be clear on the union side of things. Oftentimes the management will follow up, and sometimes they can, even in the past, they have terminated employees, and sometimes they have terminated, senior employees as well for this kind of stuff. I don't know what they would do in this particular case. I'm not sure if we want to comment on this investigation, but typically, and we follow up on the follow-up action items, but this is pretty fresh, so we want to give them a little bit of time
No,
before
my
we know what
question-
happened.
My question wasn't specifics, because I think it's inappropriate, but my question is how do we handle these things? There needs to be a accountability issue that's followed up by top management, and I just want to hear what we're doing from
Yeah.
accountability from an integrity issue.
Yeah, so we take corrective action in every case, Al. Director Pond, thank you for asking the question. We first distinguish between conduct and capability, so if it's something that the employee mistakenly did, then there's a lot of training and remedial action taken to make sure that that doesn't happen. Again, communication to the surrounding workforce. But if it's something that deliberately done from a fraudulent perspective, then corrective action is taken. If they are unionized, they go through the the escalated union system, and if not, then their direct supervisor handles it. But we don't tolerate. And to Emil's point, the specific person that committed the transgression gets corrective action. I'm using that term broadly. And also, any supervisory member that was aware and looked away also suffers the same fate.
Any additional questions?
Yes, my light is on.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Ms. Scott.
Page 9,
Okay.
you mentioned there were 5 cases investigated. There are 5 bullet points here, so are these the 5?
Yes, these are the 5.
So 2 of these are still open.
Yes.
The very last bullet point, allegation of bid influence to favor a specific bidder, that one is in process?
That is in process. We're probably 80% done.
80% done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not going to ask anything else then, because my question was going to be specifics about the, so I'll turn it back over, Madam Chair.
Mr. Frierson?
Yes, thank you, Emil. I have a question on slide number 4. When we talk about this auditing of attracting and retaining employees, what does that look like? What are we trying to discover when we audit that particular area?
We audited this a while back, and the objective, and I'm kind of going down memory lane a little bit here, but the objective was to see if we have the right processes and timeliness around those processes to first attract employees in various different capacities, whether they're bus drivers or clerical staff like my people. And after that, can we retain them? And those things can include, how, we post requisitions, job descriptions. Do we have employee handbooks? What is the onboarding process? What is the performance review process, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the elements of just, can we first draw people in, and how quickly, but also can we keep them?
Okay. I think I remember one time there may have been an employee manual book that we may needed to have.
That is exactly right.
That was,
And
yeah.
that employee manual book, the first edition, has been released and issued, so we do have that now.
Okay, good.
Yep.
And I know that sometimes people want to do everything online, but sometimes it just helps to have a document that they can put it in.
Without a doubt.
So,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. I just want to make sure that the public understood what that is and what we're trying to do to make sure that we, like I say, retain employees and make sure that we screen and have good employees that come into this space that we ask them to work in. So, all right, thank you.
Revert back to Ms. Scott. She has one more question, and then Ms. Pollock, you're next.
Without getting into specifics of the 2 that are in process, once they have been closed, will we know specifics in regards to the DNI referral, the allegation of bid influence? Will we receive that specific information?
Yes.
Thank you.
It may be verbally, but I'll be happy to give you as much detail as I can without compromising, people that wish to remain anonymous.
Thank you.
Thank you. acknowledging I am brand new here, so probably need a little more background information. Can you kind of expound a little more on what you said around needing to re-baseline what is shared regarding the capital findings?
Yeah, this was an old audit, that old audit identified a number of findings, and many of them have been remediated over time, and all of them have either been remediated or kind of worked on and partially remediated. At some point, it becomes very unwieldy to try to track 21 airplanes in the air. I think the audit committee will be better informed if we re-audit, to put it simply, re-audit this area completely, almost from like knowing what's been reported before, but kind of like, hey, let's look at everything again. Let's see what's in place, like what policies, procedures, SOPs are in place. Are they being followed if they're in place? But also let's see what procedures may be still in draft and they just need to kind of be pushed through the finish line, and not what procedures are not even being drafted. Also from a technology perspective, how well is the technology being adopted and used? As I said, we will work alongside with a professional audit firm that specializes in construction auditing. They've done all kinds of transit and governmental audits from a construction point of view.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
So you get a fresh look of the same area, which specifically is around the CPMO, the Centralized Project Management Office.
That's really helpful. And is there a timeline on when that would occur?
We'll have to work with the consultant, so I will have a much better sense of the timeline when we meet in May, during the May Audit Committee meeting. I hate to commit to something that then I have to change.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Thank you. Sorry, just a follow-up question on this. And when I see here, I see 28 on capital improvement. Total 21 have been closed, 7 are in progress, and 0 are past due. Just like understanding how we call things past due, would love to understand, because it says the audit was done like 4 years ago, but nothing's past due, but 7 aren't closed. So how do we think about past due?
So in general, we call things past due when they have not been done by the due date that the management team has established for themselves. If that due date kind of seems logical and rational to internal audit, and that's primarily me. So and I'll give you an example of a recent conversation without naming names. There was a conversation, hey, we'll implement this system in 2029 because of this, that, and the other. I'm like, that must be a typo, because that just doesn't really make much sense. We should, oh yeah, this doesn't make much sense. Let's go back to the drawing board and revisit that. So we try to be a healthy voice of reason without interfering with management and how they want to see their stuff implemented. But there's like a sanity check, if you will, that goes through me before I agree to a date, or to agree to extend the date. And with the capital program and everything that's going on there, and the 28 items, which all of them are large items around different chunks of whether it's planning or construction work that requires a SOP, or a policy, or a system. It's a lot of work, and that's why we've given them a little bit more grace. But also that's why I want to get a new baseline and a new recommitment to when these things are going to get through the finish line. Because unfortunately or fortunately, we're in a binary world. There's a due date, which is the finish line, and you're either on the final stretch, but we haven't crossed it, or you're over it, which is when we cross it. I don't know if that, hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you very much. We appreciate that update, as always. Now we're going to hear from Lawrence Williams, who's going to give us an update on our information security.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the board. I am Lawrence Williams, the Chief of Information Security here at MARTA. And for the next 10 to 15 minutes, it is my intent to give an information security update by providing a strategic overview of the activities of the Information Security Department. I want to start with the Department of Information Security is responsible for the protection of the authority's computing and networking systems, assets, and data. protection of these information systems from attacks and improper use that may disrupt the availability, the integrity, and confidentiality, and in effect, danger public safety, and the mission of MARTA, which is to advocate for and provide safe, multimodal transit services that advance prosperity, connectivity, and equity for a more livable region. It is important to me that I note today that the Information Security Department is well integrated throughout the various departments here at the authority, such as contracts and procurement. We review third-party vendors. Also, we work with safety. We work with train control. And of course, we have a strong relationship with the IT department. Since my arrival around 18 months ago, the Information Security Department has had a focus on increasing cybersecurity awareness and compliance with a variety of cybersecurity regulations. And we've done that with through a couple ways. And I want to highlight our strategic priorities. They are cyber resilience, cybersecurity posture, workforce development, compliance excellence, technology investments, and cybersecurity awareness. Right. These 6 strategic priorities assist us in focusing our resources to support our department's core functions. This helps us make strategic decisions when it comes to financing, acquisition of technology, and how we conduct our day-to-day business. Some of the key cybersecurity threats facing MARTA. It's important to me that I highlight that the cybersecurity threat landscape is rapidly evolving. It's characterized by increasingly sophisticated attacks fueled by a growing reliance on interconnected technology and the proliferation of connected devices. The cybersecurity environment here at MARTA is dynamic, it's complex, and it's ever-changing. We've seen an increase in cyber criminals who are consistently developing new attacks, new tactics, including advanced malware, social engineering schemes, and even AI-powered attacks targeting sensitive data and critical infrastructure. Due to the allotted time for this presentation, I will not go into the detail on the threats listed on the slides. However, the takeaway is that the Information Security Department is vigilant, we are prepared, and we are aware of the current threats. We've also established a very strong relationship with the Department of Homeland Security and various federal organizations to support our operations. Some of our key focus areas. Security is a priority for Mr. Greenwood and for us here at the authority. The key focus areas listed support our key initiatives within the authority, and some of them are ICS, which stands for Industrial Control Systems, and SCADA, which is the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Systems. These are the systems that are used for signaling our trains, power management, train control, and a variety of other critical functions. And we are making sure that we have cybersecurity appliances, views, and oversight on all of those areas. Another priority is cloud migration and security. We are working to improve our functionality in the cloud for greater scalability, and efficiency, and cost effectiveness. The last piece that I want to highlight for our key focus areas is vulnerability management. As configured, the transit authorities have a complex mix of IT and OT technology, including cloud environments. Vulnerability management is our team's proactive approach for addressing any identified issue quickly and efficiently. From a strategic perspective, how do we know if we're prioritizing our cybersecurity tasks correctly? One way we do this is through regulatory compliance. Achieving cybersecurity compliance is vital for our operations here at MARTA. It not only helps us prevent data breaches and the legal repercussions, but it also fosters customer trust. We demonstrate a proactive approach to security through following a plethora of regulations. My staff continually stays updated on evolving regulations and requirements and continuously monitors our activities and our environments to ensure that we are consistently in compliance. This often involves additional training, and to make sure that we're fully aware of security best practices. We are always in compliance with FTA, which is the Federal Transportation Authority, TSA, Transportation Security Administration, and CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency directives. These are not optional for us at MARTA, and it's a prerequisite for us maintaining operational funding and avoiding regulatory penalties. The Information Security Department follows a structured approach to cybersecurity risk management. We've been working with CISA and the Department of Homeland Security to follow the cybersecurity performance goals, which are used to establish a baseline of security expectations to build cybersecurity capability for our critical infrastructure. So for the last slide, I wanted to take a minute to discuss artificial intelligence and machine learning within cybersecurity and the potential benefits with the application within the Transit Authority. We all know about AI and its popularity, whether it's through applications, through various technology, and we are researching here at the Authority how we can use that in the cybersecurity realm. We believe that there is benefits for AI and machine learning, and we're carefully evaluating the pros and cons of implementing it within our ecosystem. We're not just looking to use innovative software that's AI enabled, but we're also researching ways we can have artificial intelligence and machine learning assist us in our approach with cybersecurity. So I know I've covered a lot of information at a strategic level. I'm open to any questions that there may be.
Do we have any questions at a strategic level? Mr. Pond.
I've got one. And you guys have a huge volume of challenges, and I understand the complexities of your job. And I'm asking this question not to throw water on all of the great work you're doing, but it's the same question I asked 2 years ago in a similar type meeting is do we use outside consultants sometime to kind of look at the big picture? Are we spending money in the right places to get our maximum protection? That's my question. So.
We do have outside consultant services with cybersecurity. So the short answer is yes, and we do that in a variety of ways. Also, we have a requirement for a variety of regulations that outside agencies do look at us, from Bank of America for our PCI to even Department of Homeland Security. They will look at, do independent evaluations of the work that we're doing to make sure that we're on track.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate all the work you're doing.
All right, thank you.
So our next briefing is a KPMG report from Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair Heritage. I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed in terms of where MARTA is since last week's reveal of the KPMG report. I think it's worth kind of level setting based on some of the comments we heard last week and making sure that you know, as a board understand where we are and where we plan to go next. And reiterating things like, you know, MARTA had developed early concerns about the original M&J process. You know, we may or may not have made it clear that we felt we had been excluded from the selection process and the scoping process when that started. There was a year of searching through our documents and through our records with complete and actually remarkable cooperation from MARTA. And then just a little more than a day for MARTA to respond to those draft comments. And so those kinds of things started to heighten our senses as to whether or not this was going to be an equitable and fair finding. As I said, we did push back, and we were able to go from a Thursday, you know, getting it on Thursday and being told to respond by Friday, to getting it extended to Sunday at 6 p.m. So we got that much. We did put those recommendations in, but they weren't acknowledged. They weren't referenced or used by Malden and Jenkins. So these were all the, issues that we started to develop. In fact, we had to draft an open records request just to see the working papers that Malden and Jenkins were using to arrive at their conclusions. And their response when we had asked for those records was that we are not their clients. So we understood the position we were in right from the beginning. We had objected to the methodology even before we knew the results. So I don't want folks thinking that we waited to see what the response was and then we reacted to it. We did suggest during the time with Malden and Jenkins a mechanically superior method, a more viable method, one that would later become known as the proportional method. Malden and Jenkins did not use it or did not assess it. I can't speak to why that was, whether it was time constraints or direction or just lack of interest. But the concept of the proportional method was made clear to them. It's worth noting that Malden and Jenkins never actually said that the threshold method that they used was the right methodology. They used it and presented it as a possible example. So I'm not, I'm not saying that they hung their hats on it, but that's the only one that they presented when they were completed. MARTA continued to object to flawed methodology before, during, and after the results were shared. You'll recall that we described our objection during their research, and we reiterated our objection and documented that during that truncated comments phase that we spoke of. We maintained our objection during MARTOC presentations and Transportation Council presentations, and maintained that position at every turn publicly. And the main reason for that is that we feel that the threshold method would unduly take funds from taxpayers in Fulton and DeKalb and Clayton, and it would pull funds out of the general funds that should otherwise have been used for core penny work. And I'll remind everyone that the core penny fund is currently paying $54 million to rehabilitate 5 Point Station in the city of Atlanta. So it's not that these funds are being pulled from city of Atlanta. It is money that the general population of the areas that we serve will enjoy. It's not just 5 Points, the downstairs of 5 Points. It's Airport Station, East Lake Station pedestrian bridges, Lenox, Art Center Station, Oakland City and Inman Park parking lots, Dome Station roofing repairs, smart restrooms. So a lot of work that's being done with the core penny funds, and that quite frankly, City of Atlanta will enjoy the benefits of. So in the end, MARTA has two methodologies to select from. One of them, I contend, is wrong, and we've contended is wrong from the start. And the other one is logical, equitable, and supported by KPMG. Now, the two firms are not equal, despite assertions to the contrary last week. We've got KPMG, one of the 4 largest accounting and audit firms in the U.S. and in the world by revenue, with $14 billion of revenue annually. And then we've got Malden and Jenkins, ranked somewhere around number 62, not global, but more regional in status, and nowhere near the experience with large transit agencies that KPMG does. So I just wanted to set the stage for, last week it was said that we've got 2 good firms and we've got 2 good results, so we've got to somehow, the inference was that we were going to meet in the middle, and I wanted to set the record straight that that's not what we're looking at. And MARTA's got this responsibility to recognize that the 2 methodologies are not equal, and so the 2 results are not 2 parts of the same scale. One makes sense to us, one does not. Now, even though one makes sense, I will say that there are opportunities available to us to, and we're going to take every opportunity to make sure that we're having discussions to ensure that we're as accurate as we can be. So I will say Director Zagabe and CFO Hurley continue with their discussions, some of the questions that Director Zagabe asked last week, so those are not being dismissed. But the point I'm making here is that MARTA's we're not here to seek a resolution from the board as to whether or not we go forward with what KPMG has said. This is a decision that MARTA has to make. It's a responsibility that MARTA has, and whether or not we accept the methodology and how we move the funds remains MARTA's responsibilities. So this is more for information and discussion. And I want to point out that MARTA does move funds regularly between these 2 accounts to include the City of Atlanta Capital Reserve as a matter of truing up accounts whenever appropriate. So there are a lot of portfolios, and Kevin and Greg are here. They can speak in detail about the number of times we moved big pots of money. And in fact, you know, when the Malden and Jenkins review was completed, the mayor and I had a phone call, and he said he just wanted a show of good faith that we would move a certain amount of money, millions, over from the general fund to the MARTA fund as a demonstration of good faith, and that we are not, you know, opposed to making those moves. And we did that. So, you know, without coming to the board, we did that. And that's a responsibility that MARTA exercises both ways as we deem appropriate. So should there arise a compelling case of a superior methodology or other considerations, then we, of course, will revisit that. But it is MARTA's obligation to make these moves and not wait until further conversations may dilute or pollute, you know, the landscape in terms of what the decisions are. We want to be clear and have a track in terms of what we moved and why. We do need to expedite a new IGA. We recognize that, so that we can address expectations around new service, like Summerhill, and how we handle service and maintenance adjustments for these new products. But we cannot treat everything else with a system-wide approach and then get possessive about City of Atlanta considerations. In order to be fair to all of our jurisdictions, the system-wide approach must be honored as we move through these conversations. So I just wanted to put that, you know, out there on the consciousness of this board, and assure you that we will be fair and equitable as we move forward with these conversations. And I didn't want some of the comments of last week to sort of go unaddressed, and at the same time I thought it was fair to leave space for those comments to be made, and then come back to this group in a more low-key format. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have some discussion around these issues that you'd like to bring
Sure.
up?
Yeah.
All right, I have Ms. Scott first.
In regards to the KPMG recommendation on one page, they noted the IGA should include certain things. Was that to say it's not there now and should be added? Or is it that it's there and this is what we are looking at? Because they specifically used the term, I think there were 3 items, trying to go from memory, but it said should.
All right. I mean, I'd have to see it as well, so that I'm addressing the same points. But we'll certainly take a look at that and give you confirmation as to whether or not they're simply doubling down and confirming that we're doing the right thing, or recognizing. It sounds to me like they're recognizing a gap that we need to address.
And I read it that way, and
Yeah.
I had to leave. I didn't get the exact page number, but it definitely stated should, and there were bullet points on those items.
And if that's the case, I will say that MARTA has accepted the recommendations of KPMG. So as we had the majority of Malden and Jenkins recommendations, right? So, you know, we're not saying we're perfect, and we're open to those kinds of corrections. And so without even seeing it, I can tell you that we were generally accepting of all of the recommendations that KPMG put out.
So then we can, once you verify, can accept the fact that they will be included in any additional IGA.
That absolutely, that we are, the IGA, when we do work on the IGA, that is a mutual conclusion that we will come to, but MARTA will raise the point and promote the point, and I suspect our partners will see the merits in that.
Thank you.
Chair Ide.
I'm sitting here pretty stunned, actually, that it seems to me you're making a pronouncement that that MARTA is going to adopt the recommendations of KPMG, and there's not going to be further board discussion on it. And this is a issue of such magnitude and importance. I feel like it should be a board discussion on it, and I'm not ready to do anything about that today, but we're not fighting about whether these auditors can do math or not. There may be some calculation issues involved in this. What the discussion is the methodology. And when the city of Atlanta just said that they would use 50% of their additional tax dollars to get additional bus service, and now they have not gotten above that baseline to this point, and we are continuing to charge them additional funds for additional bus service that are below what they were originally getting, I think that is something that we need to discuss on that. And I don't think that it is right without a board discussion to make a pronouncement that the proportional method is the sole and only right method of getting to a number.
Right.
It's not what the city of Atlanta believes they signed up for, of helping to, backfill general fund money. And I would ask that we continue to have some board discussion about this so everybody truly, deeply understands the issue here. This will do irreparable harm to the relationship with the city of Atlanta. And frankly, as I'm sitting here today, I'm not feeling confidence in your leadership, Mr. Greenwood.
All right, thank you, Chair Ide. And I was clear to say that these conversations between our CFO and Director Zagabe are ongoing, and I was clear to say that there are, further refinements that we can consider to make this thing more perfect. But the point remains that transferring of these funds is not something that MARTA has ever come to the board for seeking a resolution, and this is no different. The conversation behind these things in terms of, we have two methodologies on the table and only two. One works, one doesn't, but the one that works is subject to refinement, and that work is ongoing. As recently as yesterday, the two parties that I mentioned earlier are going back and forth. So MARTA has not moved, but I felt it important to let you know where we are today. And the other point is, this isn't something that MARTA can afford to just let sit for some undetermined amount of time. Well, let's set the funds appropriately to the documentation we have in place and continue making those refinements that I said we are making. So
Yeah.
no need to suspect that we are just not entertaining conversation about this. We actually are getting very specific.
Well, I think little refinements here and there. I think the big question is which is the appropriate methodology that most reflects the intent of the city of Atlanta, saying that they were going to use 50% of their money for enhanced bus service. And frankly, I think it's disingenuous to say you've never come to Atlanta to ask before. This is something exceptional of this amount of tax money coming in and of a pandemic occurring, impacting service levels to this much. This is not a run-of-the-mill, we're going to do a true-up and see where we are.
Chair Ide, when you say this amount of money, remember you're referring to a $70 million price tag that is not grounded in anything appropriate. So that number could have come back as $1 billion. It's wrong is wrong, and so we could take this offline if you wish, or continue this in a public sphere. But this is MARTA's consideration. It's MARTA's decision, and it is not a resolution item. We are giving it much more profile than we ever have any of these other $1 million moves, because we recognize the significance in the relationship with the city of Atlanta. But we also recognize that there is a larger landscape at play here. We serve more than the city of Atlanta, and it's a group.
Well, I will say buyer beware then for any further, any other jurisdiction that is thinking about putting your additional tax money on the line, and then you will have the GM of MARTA deciding how that should be spent.
Wow, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Ms. Powers?
I've got a question first about the IGA, and it may be more appropriately asked to you, Mr. Hunt. And I know that there was a proposed timeline last week about redoing the IGA. Does that require, as we're at the end of the legislative session, do the requirements in the KPMG audit mean that, I think everybody agrees that needs to be in the IGA. Does that mean that we have to reopen the MARTA Act? Because I remember last week you said that depends. So that's my question about process and as it relates to the timeline.
as to process and timeline, there were comments last week where there were references made to making changes to the MARTA IGA, which is between MARTA and the City of Atlanta. And within that document, there are project lists and other things that need to be changed and adopted given the new direction that the city would like for MARTA to take, and they need to come back together. Those need to be agreed upon. The board needs to act upon that, and then a new MARTA IGA can be signed. Also referenced in there was kind of anecdotally that, oh, we've talked to some other jurisdictions and they may want changes too. That's a different agreement. That's the Rapid Transit Contract and Assistance Agreement between all of the jurisdictions represented on the board. That would take a different timeline, and for each and every jurisdiction, or a majority of them, excuse me, to agree upon those amendments. Okay. And then there's the MARTA Act, which is the governing document, which we have to go to the Golden Dome, to the legislature, to make any amendments to. So in the comments, they were talking and they mentioned 2 or 3 different things. That's why in the moment I just said it depends, because okay, what specific document you're talking requires a moderate amount of time, a long period of time, or potentially years, depending on if it's MARTA Act changes that are proposed.
Okay. As it relates to, obviously, MARTOC ordered the KPMG audit. What are our obligations, because they are our oversight committee, as it relates to those recommendations from a legal perspective?
So MARTOC is our actual oversight committee, and each jurisdictional body has a voice in the MARTA based upon the board and the various committees. We were ordered to do the KPMG report. We've reported into MARTOC. That report was here. Legally speaking, we've complied with our actions to to MARTOC. The city audit or assessments were separate. They aren't our jurisdictional oversight group other than the board members here. But as you've heard from many board members, the GM now and then previously, we're still talking about that and how those are going to be reviewed. But legally speaking, we report to MARTOC.
Okay. The $10 million, I've got a couple of questions. I know that $10 million was transferred in the midst of Baldwin Jenkins being returned and waiting on KPMG. I don't remember. Did we vote on that?
There was no vote, but I think the amount was closer to $20 million.
All right,
but
20 million,
Mr.
okay.
Greenwood might be able to correct me on that.
Then somebody tell me how we ended up at 20 million?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Greg to stand up and give you the details. It was two transfers, and one of them was simply a call I received from the mayor seeking a good faith transfer. So you want to speak to the components, Greg?
Yes, sir. So there were 2 separate transactions that total up to, we rounded up to 20 million. It's around 19.5 million-ish, around there. But the first one was when we first went through and developed a methodology to reconcile bus service from an actual perspective to what was allocated in the 50% cut. Our first figure that we had identified was a little over 9 million at that time. And so that's
using what? How did we get to the 9 million? Because now we've got 3 different
okay. So that was
totals
before
flying around. So I want to know how we internally, regardless of method, how did we get to, hey, we're going to transfer 20 in good faith to now where we are?
So this was before Malden Jenkins. This is before KPMG. This was just our first time we sat down to try and reconcile this figure and come up with a method to reconcile.
Okay.
And so we worked with our service planning folks to identify what that method is. It has later become called the threshold method, but at the time we said, give us the hours and miles, we'll calculate the dollars on that, we'll compare that to what was allocated in the 50%, and whatever that delta is, positive or negative, is what should be transferred to or from the capital reserve. At the time, we had calculated that 9.073 million needed to be transferred to the capital reserve. And so that was the first transaction. We said, okay, well, we'll transfer that over to try and reconcile the accounts. Then carrying on the timeline, subject to the results from the assessment performed by Malden and Jenkins, they had identified where in fiscal year 20 and 21, there was some errors in our calculation of service days. We acknowledged those errors, and when we applied the same errors to the threshold method, it identified some additional amounts. And part of that amount was one of the fiscal years was 10.3 million. And that goes back to the good faith gesture where I said, we'll go ahead and transfer the 10.3 million to showing that we're willing to, go along with the results we see here, because we're acknowledging it's a calculation error on our part that would have driven that. And so that you add those two amounts together, and that gets you to the amount that has so far been transferred to the capital reserve.
Okay. And then I guess finally, where we are, I don't have any more questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just finally from the perspective of us having this discussion on the briefing today, I personally have some real concerns when our oversight authority orders, suggests, commissions, whatever verb we want to use, an audit, and then we say, no, thank you. I get that is not to minimize the concerns of my fellow board members who are representing their jurisdiction this morning, but I have some real concerns about what that looks like in the landscape, and then some concerns when, it is all taxpayer dollars that we are all concerned with, and I get that. But from the perspective of, here's the answer, and then we tell our oversight authority, no thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Williamson?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, good. So this is kind of going back to Chair Ide's commentary around the two methodologies. So and I agree, due to the unique and exceptional circumstances around the pandemic, why was it not recommended by KPMG to then use a combination of the two methodologies versus doubling down on the one methodology that they were using, knowing that Malden and Jenkins had used the proportional method? Even if we had our reasoning for using thresholds for the
other way.
Oh, the other way. But even if we had our reasoning for using the methodology we used to establish fairness and equity, right? So why didn't they just come up with, a combination of the two in order for us to get to some semblance of agreement? Because we're just going round and round here.
Yeah, I'm going to try to respond on KPMG's behalf, but I suspect that what they're doing is, practitioners in the space is finding what is the one true fair methodology that applies to all cases. You're right, the pandemic presented a very different challenge, and I believe when both methodologies are applied pre-pandemic, when you're not actually reducing service, I don't think that the results were wildly dissimilar. It just became a real eye-opener when we started taking service away. That's when KPMG said, no, that simply does not work. A math genius would probably do a better job of explaining this than I would, but to have an equation that you apply sometimes and one that you apply other times probably doesn't lend itself to the kind of consistency that the region would require. That's for KPMG to speak to. But the salient point for me is that they would be very similar results up until we started removing, and that's where the hybrid would take effect, is when we started removing service. So that's why the proportional method makes more sense.
Is that it, Ms. Williamson? We got you? Okay. Mr. Zagabe?
So just a couple thoughts. I think first, whenever you're having a really difficult discussion like this, what does success look like? And to me, success looks like we all get alignment, and we all have enough confidence to where the city of Atlanta wants to put more buses on the road. That's what we're trying to get to. Right. We want to be in a place where every jurisdiction is more excited about putting more money to MARTA so that we can get more transit because we need it. And that's where we have to get to. And that's why this discussion and us aligning is so important, because we have to have a methodology we all believe in. With that said, I think a few just thoughts from my side. One, I just want to be really clear, and it's not about the politics of it all, but like the work that KPMG did, we keep on calling it an audit. It is not an audit. They don't call it an audit. They call it a current state assessment. They have not gone through and audited and said this is exactly how it should be done. They've gone through and said, based on these two methodologies that the agency has recommended, we believe this to be the better of the two. There are a number of things that they did not look into, and I'll give one example. We have reported actuals in the past as an agency. Those actuals are not correct. We've said they're not correct. We never said it publicly. They're not correct. There's no mention of that in this report. And if this was an audit, I think one of the first things you would say is, the numbers can't move. The numbers must be consistent. And that is not stated, which I think would be a core part of any financial audit. And if we were a public company and KPMG reviewed us and our actuals moved, we would have a violation. So I think that's just one around, like, what is this? It is an assessment of two methodologies. And what's really important with these two methodologies, no matter what auditing agency was looking at them, these are not methodologies that were pulled down from, you know, the FTA, or like these are methodologies that we recommended, two. The second thing that I think is very important here, when we look at the timing of these methodologies, like, I'm not going to say one auditor is better or one is right or wrong, but I will say there was a body of work that Malden and Jenkins did. They did it at a point where we were reporting a set of actuals that we are now no longer saying are accurate. And as they were doing their work, we came to them and said, we have a new methodology. I'm not an auditor, but I don't think most auditing agencies are going to be looking at things and saying, in the middle of us doing work, we're going to look at some new method that is different than everything that we have reported out prior. And I think that's really important. It doesn't mean that they were being obtuse. It doesn't mean that they are right in what they've said either. It just means that it's not unreasonable for them to say we're not going to introduce a new methodology in the middle of us doing our work looking at historical information. And I think that's very reasonable. The third thing I'll just say, and I think this is really important, we are using an allocation method. Those are the two things that have been recommended. One is a threshold method, one is a proportional method. The threshold method, to be really simple, says before MARTA there were 10 buses on the road. Every bus over 10 is the city's and they pay for it. It's really clear. COVID has muddied the waters. It makes it very difficult to look at the world in that way. The proportional method says that as of when the pandemic hit, if there were 12 buses on the road, 2 extra were for the city of Atlanta, and in the future forever, the city is going to pay for 2 out of all 12 buses that hit the roads. No matter how many buses hit the road, the city is responsible for 2 out of 12. And the fundamental issue I have with that methodology is that when you look at our scheduled service within the city of Atlanta that we have reported, and you look at the routes that are scheduled, not actuals, but scheduled, the scheduled service in Atlanta is equal to what it was before MARTA. So today, the city of Atlanta, in the MARTA dollars, is being charged for $40+ million of service when the service levels are exactly the level they were in 2016 on a scheduled basis. Now, we're going to talk a lot about actuals, and I know we can't track actuals and all that, but I don't think we're putting more buses on the road than what we schedule. And that's the challenge I have, and that's what I've let Mr. Hurley know, and he has been very responsive, and we're continuing to discuss. And I don't want to sit here and say we need to introduce a third methodology. What I'm saying is there is a lot of merit in looking at scheduled levels of service. If we cannot pull actuals, at least look at that, and what they say is that we're not putting more buses on the road than we did before MARTA started.
Thank you, Director Zagabe. I just to put a point on that, the points that Director Zagabe is raising are exactly what I was talking about, and that's trying to get closer to a solution that is defensible, something that, but starting with the fact that we have two methodologies in front of us, both of them face the same landscape that you were talking about. So both of them would, you know, sink or swim under the same merits or lack thereof of the way we do business. So those considerations continue to be a part of the very discussion that I introduced earlier that you were having with Mr. Hurley. I have confidence that they will get us closer, but you know, in terms of addressing the two methodologies, that's where MARTA stands as of last week. Thank you. Jennifer.
Oh, Ms. Hyde, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think Mr. Zagabe was more adept at expressing my concerns also, and hopefully really laying it out there for our colleagues and for anybody listening at home of what this issue is, but I think there has to be a sanity check of more MARTA, paying for more, enhanced bus service, something on top of what we were already getting. And I wish that we did have actuals so that we could see, you know, with greater precision of, you know, what went away. You know, what did we have, what new came on top, and what went away. That would make it a whole lot easier if we had all of that. But I also think the sanity check is, at the end of the day, is the city of Atlanta getting greater service than they used to get? Because we're paying for greater service. And if we're not getting any greater service, then I don't think that methodology works. And I know, you know, Mr. Greenwood and I have spoken. I feel like there is a number in the middle. Mr. Greenwood feels like one methodology is wrong and one is right. The wrong one is one that MARTA used initially until they decided it no longer worked for them, and now they have a new one. I mean, MARTA used the threshold to determine what was more. And then when the pandemic came, we said, we don't like that methodology anymore. We like the proportional one so that we can keep on using some, you know, more MARTA money for this. So I do think that there's not a right and there's not a wrong. There's a fairness issue. And I think of throwing out the threshold methodology, which MARTA adopted in the beginning to do this program, and saying that it's wrong, the proportional method is the one and only right method. It's not KPMG's method, it was MARTA's method. KPMG was running the numbers through it, but KPMG has not come out, is my reading, to say, you know, we took an independent look at this and this is how this should be calculated. I just don't think we're ready to put the pencils down. And I know you're saying we're going to continue to work on it, but you've also said there is a right and wrong methodology. And I strongly disagree that as a body, MARTA is ready to come to that decision, that there is a right and wrong methodology on this.
Chair, I just want to point out, you said that MARTA was using the threshold method and then decided that it didn't work and went on to the proportional method. I would rather say we discovered that it didn't work. Not that we just decided, but in trying to apply it to the true conditions, we discovered that it didn't work. And you know, we weren't such that we were going to stick to our guns and say we made this decision. We changed with, you know, with the changing landscape. And as the new information became available, we adapted to it. And that's not a course of action that we're going to shy away from. We will continue to adapt to what makes sense. And yeah, out of the gate, I didn't, like I said, I didn't wait to see what, you know, the Malden and Jenkins method was going to cost or give us. We identified right out of the gate when they were doing that work that was no longer appropriate. That's the difference. That I don't want us to sit here and characterize that we waited to see what the result was and then made a decision. We were upfront about this is something we used. We saw the problem with it, and we're sharing it with them. So yes, if we're looking at two methodologies, there's one that I can support and one that I cannot.
And I would just like to hear your explanation of when the city of Atlanta engaged, it's authorized their money to be spent on enhanced bus service for more service, and they are not getting more service.
Yeah.
How you justify that?
Well, I would go to the fact that at the time that enhanced bus service was determined as something that City of Atlanta wanted, there was enhanced bus service. They did get a lot more bus service, and what we're saying now is someone's got to pay for that. And quite frankly, I can't stand here in good faith as you know, the CEO of MARTA and expect that the people that are going to pay for that is DeKalb and Clayton and Fulton when the enhanced bus service happened inside the City of Atlanta. So yes, all that bus service was added. It was subsequently removed, but that's the answer to the question. The City of Atlanta is being requested to pay for the bus service that was added in City of Atlanta.
Sorry, this will be brief. I'll just say I'll go back to what I said success looks like. I really want us to feel very confident and feel very aligned. And I would just say I'm very happy to be a part of any further discussions, and I look forward to us standing here as a board and me being the first person to put my hand up and say, hey, I feel really good about how we've calculated this, where we land, and that we have the right number that we're all going to stand behind. So I just look forward to getting there soon.
We agree.
Well, If I can say, I just want to say the same thing that you said, Mr. Zaga. We've had a couple conversations yesterday. I really want us to move forward with this. I sit as a representative from another district, but I'm very, very concerned about this for everyone and what it looks like as an image for our agency, because we try and always have tried to do what's best for the agency as a whole. And this particular time, we have one of our jurisdictions that we're dealing with an issue. And I really don't know, Mr. Hunt and Mr. Greenwood, y'all can just stop me mid-sentence, it's okay. But in the past, we have formed small work groups of 2 or 3 people that are board members that have a lot of expertise in this area to work behind the scenes, so that we can't every board meeting do this. I mean, there's so much work that needs to be done every day. And we want to continue to do that good work, because there's a lot of good stuff happening here. But we have a blip on the radar right now that we need to address. And so I'm suggesting, and I don't know that I can, so that's okay if I can't, but I'm suggesting that we have a small work group made up of some of our finance people and anyone else that needs to be audit, as well as a couple of our board members that are very versed in this, so that we can have work going on quickly behind the scenes to get this resolved, and at the same time be able to come back and report to the board. And I hope that will meet everyone's concerns. If that's not a good idea, now's the time to tell me.
Well, I have a comment. I think it's a great idea, and the board chair has the ability to create a committee to do so, and I think it would be fair if there were board members from each jurisdiction, so that we could communicate to our jurisdictions, because our leadership will be looking at this as well. And the conversation as to whether we are all treated fairly will be able to be explained through each of those partners and board members. Madam Chair, you do have that authority.
Okay. Yeah, I think, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Firestone. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that's a great idea for us to do it in a smaller group, and that way we can really have some real hard conversations about how we can make sure that this works. This is important for all of us, because this framework that we're using is going to affect us as we all begin to bring additional funds on in our jurisdictions. And I want to make sure that we are clear on what we're going to use to measure what that revenue may look like, what additional service is going to look like. All the things now that we're discussing about Atlanta will be applicable to us as the other jurisdictions begin to grow. And so I just want to make sure that we build a great foundation, that we can make sure that we are using the funds in the way in which we say, and we can communicate that to the people that we're trying to represent. So I'm all for the small group.
Okay, we got Mr. Hunt.
So we are in audit committee, and
Yes.
That's why I said I wasn't
Yeah.
sure I could do it.
Yeah.
I knew what the rules were, but I didn't know that it could come through audit committee.
to Ms. Scott's point, that probably should come before the full board. And it also, not to put any breaks or anything, but also may give this body some time to flush it out, so it'll be a simple, coherent way forward and resolution.
That's what I was trying to say, but I did know that I felt like at some point we've got to look at this a little differently. I'm going to go in order here. That would be Mr. Pond.
This is going to be an audit discussion, all right. I think the conversation has probably gotten a little more emotional than it typically does, but I think everyone on this board wants a fairness, and I think it's all about fairness. And I go back to Chair Ives' point and Jacob's point is that Atlanta's paying for this half a penny, a quarter of a penny, and they want to be sure that they're getting the service that money is paying for. So I do think that there's more work to be done here, and I do think there's more work to be done and try to get to something that is fair. And sometimes people won't accept the answer, but I think we can try as hard as we can to look at this again and come up with a fairness approach.
Any more discussions?
I just have one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Powers.
No, it's all right. I support the committee too, and you know, I think it is unfortunate with how well this board works together that we've come to this spot, and I think on both rounds it feels like City of Atlanta versus jurisdictions, or in fairness to them, jurisdictions versus the city of Atlanta, and I think that that is an unfortunate spot that we have gotten here, so hopefully that'll resolve it.
Hi, Ms. Jones.
Hey. 8 southbound trams later. So Ms. Powers, I hear what you're saying. I don't actually feel that way. I just want to put that out there. It's not anything about one jurisdiction against another. This is really about what's best for the system, and we need to figure out a way to calculate these service hours no matter what, because we can't move forward, whether it's the city of Atlanta, Clayton, DeKalb, Fulton, that we need to know what this methodology is no matter what, and that's always been the question. So having a working group to figure that out where everyone is comfortable, I think is the best way forward. And I don't want anyone to believe that there's any sort of animosity or unwillingness to work together, because that's always been the intention and should continue to be so, because we're all here for the betterment of the system. Because if MARTA doesn't work, this region isn't going to work.
I totally agree. Just recognizing who I am as a person and the manner in which I ask questions. I just wanted to be clear. Self-realization is important. So I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah. And I'll just say the same thing. I view this as a problem we need to solve. There's nothing personal and no animosity with the jurisdictions. My frustration today was it felt like there was a premature calling an end to the process, and I didn't feel like the process was finished and it merits more discussion. I will figure out exactly the process for putting together an ad hoc working committee, and we will move forward on that front.
And for MARTA's part, you know, the fact that I said earlier we are continuing to work through this with a representative from the city of Atlanta is exactly the point we're making. What we're talking about now is expanding that conversation so that other folks from other jurisdictions are a part of that. And MARTA, of course, would have no objection to that. So it's just more folks helping us with the conversation that we are currently involved in.
Do we have anything else that needs to come before the audit committee? We stand adjourned. Thank you.